maybe I might not be able to stay in academia forever, or maybe industry looks really interesting and I want to go into industry. How do you make that transition? How do you take the skills that you have in astronomy, that you've learned in astronomy PhD or in postdoc? How do you take that and translate that into something that somebody in industry would understand and care about? And so we thought we should do a session around this, because it's often not talked about a lot in academia. And certainly professors, their experience is coming up through academia. And rarely do they have the advice to give about how to not do something academic. So we have Silke Maes here today, and she did her PhD in astronomy, and she told us about this morning, and she is now a data scientist outside of astronomy. Got the perfect perspective and transition recently.
Yeah.
Perfect, kind of the perfect stage and perfect person to give us like very fresh insights as to how you did that.
Yeah.
So I think you have a few slides you go through.
Yes.
And then we're going to do like a very conversational tone for about an hour. So have questions, and we'll have a conversation with her, and I can also join in because I also spent some time outside of academia and sort of weed my way back in. But very much just like want this to be useful for you guys. So feel free to like engage and ask questions and so on. Do you have any questions before we start? All right, so take it away.
Yeah, so indeed, Daniel asked me to prepare some slides since I transferred to industry just recently. It was in November. So I prepared some slides, but if you want to interrupt or ask questions in between, feel free to do so. This is just my experience. Of course, it's very specific, also where I ended up. So this might not apply for everyone, but hopefully you can take something away from this. So what I briefly thought to cover in this introduction of this session is some useful skills for industry that we all acquired during a PhD or during a postdoc. Then maybe my personal experience of finding a job, that's probably the most interesting. And then also some things I learned so far from the difference between industry and the academic world. So to start with, how I felt during the PhD, thinking of transferring to industry, and also some colleagues of mine, how we felt is specifically for this audience. Sometimes it feels like all your phantom skills or your coding skills and the very specific things we're doing with these stars and outflows and disks and stuff, it doesn't feel really useful to go to industry because there's nowhere a practical thing for stars. But we have gathered a lot of skills, and I listed here a few that we all really acquired. For example, we have a lot of interpersonal skills, giving these presentations like we're doing here, talking with colleagues in conferences, sharing knowledge with each other. And then working a team, I think, is also a big plus. I hope we're all very used to working a team to gather some useful results within astronomy. But we're also very good in problem solving and critical thinking, because that's basically what we do in research, right? We try to solve difficult problems. And then I think also a very important one is that, in research, you need to be adaptive with learning new codes or new methodologies or maybe other skills. So we're also very quick at learning new things. And then, of course, we're all managing our own projects, sort of, or PhD or postdoc or whatever. So we have also some management skills. And I think these are all like maybe broad and a bit vague, but these are important things that you can, for like future job interviews, really highlight to a certain position you're applying to. And I think mainly if you're applying to positions outside of academia, where they really value having a PhD or having worked in academia, I think these things are pretty well known, but there's no harm in highlighting them. So I think these are a few of the biggest ones that you should be aware of, that we all have without us knowing, maybe. So that's important. Then further, with my personal experience. So first of all, I'll quickly say what I'm doing now, because that gives some context. So I work at this company, Semaqua. It's a very tiny company, actually. We're only with 11 people. And we're doing innovative digital water management. So all kinds of things with water, basically. We try to adapt them to this changing climate, try to adapt to droughts, to flooding and these things. And what I'm specifically doing or helping with within the company is optimizing smart control systems. So for example, we have a project in Brussels running now, where we try to optimize the whole sewer systems to actually make sure that there's less overflow from the dirty water to the river when it's like heavy rainfall, like yesterday. I'm also helping in modeling some subsystems. We're doing now, or we're trying to model some drinking water predictors, so that depending on which rainfall will come or droughts coming up, we hope to be able to predict how much drinking water people will generally use based on a bunch of data, of course. I'm also working on a big project in Wallonia, where we try to also control the Sambre and the Meuse, so two big rivers in Wallonia. We try to control the whole system automatically, also including like weather predictions and trying to predict how the water levels will change along the time. So that's a bit of context what I'm working in now. So as you can see from these things, it's basically modeling and data. That's a bit the general, the connection to what I did in astronomy, basically. Then how did I find this job? I think this is a process that goes for everyone a bit differently. But I was already talking with Terry earlier. It's a bit being at, as you were saying, being at the right time in the right spot. So first of all, how it went for me, already I think in the third year of my PhD, I started thinking about transferring to industry. And at KU Leuven in Belgium, there are the university organizes some sessions where you can start to know what do you want in a job. So these, you can also, I think, find some modules online where you just get a bunch of questions, sort of questionnaire, where you then in the end learn what you like in a job or in a future job. For example, what kind of flexibility do you want? Do you want to be able to start late with your work, or maybe really have a 9-to-5 thing? Do you want to build a big career, or are you fine with just doing something that you're interested in and maybe not grow very much? I don't know, different things. How do you think about work-life balance? I think this is all important to know, or to get to know when you're looking for any kind of job, maybe also in academia, but especially also outside of academia, because it can differ, I think, very much from different branches. Then the second thing I started to explore when transferring to academia is sort of what kind of sector do you want to end up in? For me, I want to do something useful, not that astronomy is not very useful, although it's very interesting, but I want to do something more down to earth, let's say, literally. So I want to end up in something environment, climate-wise, to help a bit there. So that's what I explored along the way. And then of course you need to start making a CV. It's a very different CV than the academic one. I was actually thinking of just putting here an example of my CV, but I forgot it. But that's not too bad. But in industry, it's typically just one page summarizing what you did, some useful skills. So it's very different from the long CVs we're used to in academics. And then of course it's start looking for jobs. That's maybe the hardest part. Where do you start looking? But I'll come back to that in a second. But then of course it's also important. So I started with sort of general CV to know, to know how to present myself, let's say, on paper. But then if you see some job openings, some job applications, you need to of course fine-tune your CV a bit specific to the position, and highlight there some of the things they mentioned in the application. But in the end, it comes down to scrolling through LinkedIn, I think, a lot. I think also lately LinkedIn is being used more also in academics, especially since Twitter went crazy. So it's very useful, I think, to already, if you're thinking of transferring to industry, to start building up your LinkedIn page a little bit. It's a bit annoying social media, but I think it has some value. That also there are recruiters on LinkedIn, but in general, if you start liking different pages or different topics, you get suggested more things that you might be interested in. And actually, this is how it happened for me. I had a habit after a while to just scroll on LinkedIn, like on a Sunday morning when you're still laying in bed, and suddenly an application popped up that I found interesting, and I just applied. And this is what I did for several applications, of course. And then I happened to have a job quite quickly. So I was lucky in that position, but of course, it doesn't go like this for everyone. I like a close colleague of mine. She also came from astronomy. She had a bit of a harder struggle. And actually what helps for me was having done the machine learning in my PhD. So that's also, of course, not for everyone the case, but I was lucky that I could do some machine learning in my PhD. And that, these days, that's a big selling point. Not that I feel like a master in machine learning, but still people in companies think you are. So that really helped for me. Yeah, and then there's also another thing that you hear often is that it might be useful to practice for interviews. So sometimes people advise you to not for the first job, or wait, let me rephrase, not like apply for the dream job in the first time. Okay, I'm not making so much sense. So people advise you that if you see a very good job application, you really want to do the job, just not do that as a first interview, because then you struggle maybe a bit. But I didn't really, yeah, I just went for something, and I think I applied in the end for 3 or 4 different things that all interested me, and I went to those. So I didn't really took that advice. So my takeaway on this is that maybe it's a good thing if you want to practice a bit, but I think also if you see a good opportunity, some nice application you're interested in, don't hesitate to try to apply, although it's your very first interview. I think that was I wanted to say about that. Yeah, and then the last thing I prepared a little bit is what have I learned so far? So I really learned that the industry world is quite different from academia, more different than I expected. Yeah, first of all, I learned that time really is money in industry. So there, yeah, in our case, in my little company I'm working in, we're really working on different projects. These projects are funded by some clients or other people, and sometimes for a certain project, it's not so much money we get from it. So I learned that you sometimes really should just stop somewhere and not continue that research kind of thing you're doing, because it's not worth the time, because time is always money. That's a bit different, I think, with academia. I also noticed there's a bit more like tactics and politics sometimes going on, especially when you're working with projects and clients, and there is some, you need to be more careful what you're saying. Maybe that's also a bit the case in academia. I've not come across that close in academia, but in the industry world, it's a bit more like you need to be subtle and tactical. And so that's also what I said already a little bit. You should stop at some point. Like within my PhD, it felt like I could go continuously deep in the topic I was researching. But in industry, it's a bit different. There is like really an end, although it's not perfect, and we just need to be happy with that, which felt a bit weird in the beginning. And it comes back to the money thing actually. So that's these are a bit the main 3 differences I learned so far. Of course, I'm only working for like 6 months in academia, in industry now. And it's also in a maybe not so typical company, because we're with only 11, and so it's not that we have one manager managing our team and that we're really told what to do. So I still have a lot of freedom within my job, which is also very nice, because that's what I very much like in academia. So it's a pathway that's different for everyone, of course. So there was a little bit what I prepared. But shout questions, I don't know, have a discussion.
Thank you, Silke, for sharing some initial thoughts.
Okay.
All those things. Oh, yeah, that's fine.
Just in the video, you can please continue the microphone or use the microphone.
I wasn't sure if are we using the microphone?
You can, if you're just close to this thingy.
Okay. Will it behave itself? Yeah. Everything you said resonated with me based on my own experience in the industry as well. All of those topics, like every bullet point, we can go much more in depth on.
Very close.
Really close. There we go. Yeah. Who wants to start? Anybody have a question to start? Somebody has a question. Yeah.
Super. So I also have been outside of academia for a couple of years. So I would like to ask you if you also have this question, this issue, basically. So when you are in academia, basically we are more or less sharing the same passion. So also discussing with peers is easy because it's science. While when you move outside academia, you basically time is money also in between colleagues. So it's harder to connect with people that are completely different from us and requires time. Do you also find this issue in your path, or is probably something connected? Because when I left academia, I went on something completely different from technical sciences, so people were interested in something else that, for example, I was not very familiar.
Okay, so I'll try to repeat a bit the question because the mic is not working perfectly. So I got a question that from someone who also has some experience for a few years, even in outside of academia, which is maybe much more than I have. If you also find that connecting to other colleagues then is maybe harder because you're not sharing the same passion than when you're really working in research. I think in my company for now, I don't really notice that because what brings us together is that we're trying to with all these drought problems and flooding problems these days, we want to really make a difference in that sense. So we still share some a bit the same passion, but I can very much imagine that in very different companies this might be indeed the case that it's hard to chat to colleagues about certain things because you're not caring as much maybe.
Okay, we're continuing on the microphone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for sharing your experience. So my question is, what is in your opinion the thing you need to write in a industry CV that is not present in an academic CV?
Okay, so to repeat the question first, what in my opinion is very useful in an industry CV compared to an academic CV? That was the question. I've been told that like the amount of papers you published and talks you gave, that in an academic CV, as far as I know, you're very extensive on that part. But I think also in an industry CV, it's very useful to mention it. Like, for example, I wrote so many papers as first author. I gave many public talks. But you need to be very much more concise in an industry CV. And I think highlighting. I'm now again on these skills slides. I think highlighting these slides, these different skills that you have with some examples is very useful. I think you don't do that in an academic CV, as far as I know. So that's maybe then the biggest difference or importance in an industry CV, that you highlight these skills with some examples why you are, for example, a good critical thinker. Highlight because you did this or that in some project in academia. I think that's maybe the biggest difference, and be much more concise of all your papers you wrote and stuff, which is a bit unfortunate, of course, especially when you're already in the past the postdoc phase. I think that's the biggest difference. And keep it to 1 or 2 pages. That's probably also hard.
Thank you very much. I wanted to ask, when you're starting out as a student, you spend a lot of time getting up to date with literature and learning what you're doing. When you switched into industry, did you have some kind of like downtime, is what I would call it, where you were getting to grips with what you were meant to do? And was your company understanding about that because time is money? And they expect you to just like hit the ground running? Or did they
I think so. The question is for people online, if you get time, or in my experience, I got some time to get acquainted with the new things I needed to learn, because of course time is money. That's also in industry a bit hard. But I think in my case that was pretty okay. I think it was more on a personal level that I struggled with the fact that I didn't know anything about hydraulics and rivers and sewer systems. So it felt a bit hard to take off with all the projects. But I talked sometimes about that with my boss. It doesn't feel like a boss since you're only with 11, and they were very understanding in my case, so that was very nice. And I also heard from some other people that transferred to industry, that where they ended up, it was also generally okay to of course you need some time to work yourself into new things, especially when you're coming from like astronomy, which is pretty exotic for most people outside of astronomy. So they understand. So in my case, they really understand it. But I was also lucky that I could still follow a course at the university. It was a bit unofficial. I maybe shouldn't shout that too loud when this is put on YouTube. But so it was about, I was asking about, is there like a general book or something, or some course notes? And then they were like, you can just follow a course, it's all fine. So that was very nice. So in my case, they were very understanding, and I hope everywhere that should be the case. But of course, it's not always. But
Can I bounce on that?
Yeah, sure.
I think from my own experience and my partners as well, when you start as a junior in a company in general, the people are willing to help you like start. Because even people who come from like engineering studies and stuff, they have no experience. So the books and the actual work is different, and there's always this consensus in any good company. You can, of course, find a company that doesn't do that, but in general, when they have good management, your peers are willing to help if you're a junior. It's like some sort of common sense that everyone has. I don't know if that works in any field, but like computer science in general, because there will always be like the companies have a niche, and you need to learn that niche anyway. So it's not that much different. As long as you advertise like I'm quick at learning things, which is fair that all are, I think they'll be happy with that.
Just to expand on that, the time is money is really key there too. Just based on my own experience, like the terminology that we use was a blocked, like if I'm blocked on work and I can't progress, somebody will drop what they're doing to help you because time is money. If I can't do anything, then you're paying me to do nothing. So someone else should stop what they're doing and like unstick you so that you can now you have people working again. And it's, I mean, we do that informally in academia, like we just like to help each other, I think. But there it's like, there it's because of time. Time is money. It's just like you're gonna lose money because we're paying this person now to sit around doing nothing.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to try to communicate it to the manager or whoever is more in charge than you, to let them know if you're indeed a bit blocked on work or blocked on the knowledge you need to know to do the job when it's like the first time you're entering in that topic. So communication is is everywhere always important. It's not maybe the easiest, but
yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
One question regarding the technical interviews you might have. How was your experience? Because I heard that sometimes you have the first selection based on who you are, and then they actually test what you do. And in your case, you know some machine learning beforehand.
Yeah.
How was actually the technical interview?
Yeah. So in my case, the question is about the technical part of some interviews, how I experienced that. So I applied only for a few jobs, and somehow I didn't really have technical interviews. So it's also a bit strange because indeed for this job, so yeah, they hired me, and then I was also a bit like insecure, like how do they know I can even do this? But for another job I applied for, I really had some kind of technical interview where there was just a blank page and I needed to, for example, program Fibonacci in Python, and I totally forgot how it went, and it was something with recursion, so I stressed out a bit. But I think, it depends very much on the company. If you're applying to very big companies, often you first need to go through some HR process, and then you need to, of course, with your CV make a difference, or with your motivation letter, I forgot to say that, that's also something. But yeah, in my case, it was a very small company, so we just had an online chat basically with two of the people working there, and they asked me some questions, a bit technical maybe, but then rather in the sense that I talked about, like, I made this emulator, the surrogate model, and then they were like, hey, that's also something we're doing, sort of, with like the complicated river models. They also make some kind of surrogate model about it, so they saw some linking points. So yeah, in my case, there weren't really technical interviews, but I think if we're not able to handle these things, unless it's very topic related or something, then who will be? So I don't stress too much about it, I think. Also, it's not as if you're doing, sometimes these technical interviews are quite hard, and they are built to be very hard, and maybe generally people only get half of it right, but that's maybe good enough. So don't stress too much, I think.
I think there's two different styles of here is the technical interview that we give to everybody. And then here is the sort of soft question of, we're working on this problem. We don't quite know what to do. Let's bounce it off the interviewee, see what they can do with it in 15 minutes. Just to there's one sort of gauging of, do you have this skill? And then it's just like, can you take a problem and think about it? I can ask another question unless someone else has one. Daniel?
I'm just curious, so for a lot of people, it's quite a difficult decision whether to leave academia, especially, we all do astronomy because we're passionate about it in the first place. So, I mean, you seem to have a quite clear head about why you wanted to not continue in astronomy. Can you explain a bit more why that became clear to you, and what were your factors?
That's a good question. So the question is a bit, why did I leave astronomy? It's maybe a bit hard to talk about it in front of many astronomers. But yeah, yeah, astronomy is still no, astronomy is nice and it's interesting, but I missed personally, I missed a bit the application or something to human life, which is, yeah, that's a very big thing. Of course, somehow we all have an impact. But it was a bit the combination with, yeah, getting myself motivated for the PhD project, which was sometimes hard to have all the intrinsic motivations for myself. So that's like a personal point of view. So it lacked a little bit that intrinsic motivation. So I hoped if I stepped outside this, outside of astronomy, that there's other parts that interest me that give more also extrinsic motivation. And I think that it was partially that, and then also like the whole academic world, building up your career. Yeah, I think many of you can say that it's quite hard to go through postdoc stages and move around places, and maybe other struggles that come along. And I also knew pretty fast that I didn't want to become like a professor in the end. And then, yeah, you also get the advice from some other people, like leave right after the PhD, because if you leave later in the academic route, they sometimes say you're like too specified in some topic and that you're hard to like still turn around to other topics. But yeah, so that's maybe all things that played in my mind. Yeah, it's hard to summarize why I chose to leave it, but there was a bit of different things. But I think it was mainly the trying to make an impact and find some extrinsic motivation apart from the intrinsic motivation.
Can I expand on that? So you said you don't want to become a professor, fair play, that's fine. But like, what's the path for you now? I know you've only worked in this company for 6 months. It sounds like you're really enjoying it, but it's a company of 11 people. So where do you go from here? Like, what is your pathway for the future?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So for the people who did online who didn't hear it, I got the question, how do I see my future, basically?
Sorry.
No, that's fine. But yeah, it's true. So I'm now working in a small company, but actually I'm in general not looking so much in the future. So I think that's maybe also weird to say, but I'm not a very ambitious person, which is strange to say. But yeah, I like what I'm doing now, just on a small scale, trying to make some impact and doing some work that interested me. And yeah, maybe within this small company, I can climb up a little bit, or if the water doesn't interest me anymore, I try to move. But actually, maybe a little side part of that, I'm now actually considering doing a postgraduate in like climate and weather modeling, which is again studying. I don't know if I'm looking forward to that, but yeah. So I'm trying to build a little bit more knowledge inside of the weather and climate world, let's say. So that's maybe how I see myself in a future pathway, not maybe staying in this company for the rest of my life, but going into climate modeling in general, which I think also links a little bit back to the physics, of course, and maybe a bit of astrophysics. So that's how I see a bit my future career path.
Yeah.
I have a question actually for several people in the room, I guess, especially those who left academia and then come back. But I've heard that it's very difficult once you've left academia to get back in. I've been told that, you know, if you haven't done a post, well, if you're not basically applying for a postdoc straight after your PhD or after doing another postdoc, you're not going to get one. How true is that? How difficult is it to come from industry back into academia? Actually, a year of industry before my PhD, but I don't know if that's possible to do any later in your career than PhD. So, you know, how firmly is that door closed once you've gone into industry?
Maybe to repeat the question for the people online, the question that was now asked is, once you, many people, or not many, some people might have left academia and came back, especially after the PhD stage. And then the question was, is it hard, or how hard is it to get back to academia? So some people who did this can maybe start.
Maybe I can start on that piece, because I left academia for 3 years and then came back into a tenure track position. I didn't come back into physics department. I came back into a computer science department. And computer science is very different in terms of its hiring requirements than physics and astronomy. In astronomy, it's a very closed pool and very competitive. And computer science, if you're really good, you just go into industry and get paid 2 times or more times more. So the people who go into academia in computer science generally are the people that really want to be in an academic environment. So the competitiveness is a bit less. I'm also personally at not necessarily a small, but like a smaller university in Canada, which also helped. So the competition was also lowered for that reason for me. So
That's home for you as well.
it's also home for me. Yeah, that's why I was there. That's why I went there. It was home for me. And that's where I wanted to be. And luckily they were hiring. And yeah. So don't know if that it maybe helps give some insight, but it's not a full picture. Claudia?
Sorry, so I left twice academia, three times, but one was short. So one before the PhD for 1 year and a half. So no, for 6 months, and then 1 year, more or less 1 year between the PhD and the postdoc. So if you quit science before winning a PhD, it's easier to go back, in the sense that what you have to do is that you have to prepare your PhD application, which means that you have to have some contacts. So you have to know who you contact, let's say, for applying to PhD programs. But having other skills, it's also seen, as a plus in the PhD application, because you will learn something. And also it's not that relevant for your academic career path, because a lot of applications depends on the PhD defense. So the only thing that is a bit annoying is that when you go to conferences, you are the grandmother of the PhD students, which is what I was. But apart from that, it's more or less, actually is you just have to put some effort in devising strong applications. If you quit, so the academic stop that I have between the PhD submission of my thesis and the postdoc is basically what is making me very, very hard, for example, to have to apply for the EERC, because you basically have 1 year plus than 1 year less than the others of publications. But most importantly, you go out of the system, and that means that people don't remember you anymore, they don't cite you anymore, and you have to rebuild yourself according to a strong warrior profile before. So that depends a bit on when you quit and what you do in between. But in between the two stops I have, the second one is more impactful.
Let's try to restart that research again. Yeah, I felt that too.
But also because, again, a lot of countings are from the PhD defense. So basically it's 1 year in which you don't publish for any reason that is not relevant for the applications.
Yeah. So another question, unless someone else has one? I prefer audience questions, especially from students. On the slide you have up there right now, interpersonal skills, working in a team, problem solving, critical thinking, quick at learning, project management. How do you demonstrate that on a resume?
Yeah.
How did you demonstrate it, at least, maybe?
Yeah, so I think that relates a little bit to a question that was asked before. I think giving examples is the best way. And although these examples are still pretty general sometimes and vague, yeah, the interpersonal skills, if you include like presentation giving and writing, there you can say like, I spoke at so many conferences, I wrote so many papers. And working in a team, that's a bit more, yeah, it's hard to really give examples to it. Problem solving, you can there state some projects you worked on. If you, I don't know what people specifically are doing at Phantom, but if you're trying to implement something new for a certain disk model or whatever, I think you can try to give a little bit examples of those things. I can maybe, if it's useful, get my CV. Overleaf. Then I can show a little bit how I try to demonstrate it if the internet.
So you did your CV in Overleaf?
Yes. I think that's also maybe a big difference to industry and academic world. In industry, they work with Excel and Word and stuff. I don't really like it. But yeah, that's okay. This is a Dutch one. I hope if I compile this. Yeah. Okay, this is an ugly English one. I think I have a better one. Yeah, so these are all different fine tunings that I did from, why is it okay, but it's not the perfect version, but here is, how can I, all right, so here in the strengths section, I try to highlight, some of these skills you mentioned. So for programming, I mentioned that I built Maze, and then I can find also something that I just programmed myself. What did I say here? The analytical thinking and problem solving. Yeah, it's all a bit general, but I think that's a bit the whole thing about applying for jobs that I say here, that I identify scientific puzzles, and you need a bit.
Well, you very explicitly say project and time management. Being a PhD student is being your own manager.
Yeah, exactly. I think
that's like a really key takeaway, is just being really explicit
exactly
on a resume, industry resume. Because like you said, you have a page, 2 pages max, and you want someone to look at that and be able to pull out immediately what they should get. Don't have them read between the lines. Just
exactly.
Put it right in their face. This is what you should see.
Yeah, exactly. Be explicit. I think that's maybe a good tip. Here I say, leadership and organization. I also mentioned that I helped organizing some international conferences. That sounds very big, but I helped organizing some meetings where you had to order some catering, etc. It's small things, but you need to blow them a little bit up, maybe. But so this is not the best version of my CV, as you see the jump in the LaTeX. But also maybe some highlighting some things. So here this is the title of my thesis. Of course, it doesn't ring a bell for people outside of academia. So I try to, this is then the astronomy explanation, but I also try to explain this somehow in more of an industry thing. So astronomy wise, I say that I investigated the key physical and chemical processes in these HB outflows. Of course, people outside of astronomy are nothing with this, but then I try to explain this, that it's a data-driven project where I use hydrodynamics, especially SPH. Maybe sometimes I use it also in some industry things. I did some chemical modeling. I combined it with machine learning. Then I also mentioned that I work with neural networks and the autoencoder, so that they have some specifics, concrete examples. So you need to find a way to indeed translate the astronomy things you did to some of the buzzwords that they use in industry. And also another part of my CV that I put in is some extracurricular things. I don't know if it is well appreciated in industry, but here I also say I did some science communication that I presented in schools, and there was also in Flanders a certain science festival where I did a presentation. I mentioned that I was a teaching assistant. I think that counts for everyone here, that they also did some teaching duties. I think this is also very important to mention to industry, because it doesn't necessarily say that you need to teach in that industry job, but just it lets the people know that you are able to explain things and help other people. At the institute in Leuven, I also represented the junior staff, which was never, it's something you do sort of voluntarily sometimes in institute, and it's not really appreciated in an official way. So that's why I also put it in my CV. And then I organized some other things. So you need to, put all your skills together on one. This has to, it's supposed to be one page, but try to find some concrete examples and highlight them.
There's a couple of things I'll just mention that I see on this. The way you've underlined things in the first section, you've underlined the very specific words that you want someone to see quickly. Machine learning, hydrodynamics, right? Just below your PhD, you have a set of keywords. Python, machine learning.
That's true, but they need to be nicer normally. Wait, but that's true. Maybe if I recompile this one.
I'd ask about the keyword hydrodynamics. So, I mean, you've landed a job with a water company.
Exactly.
How significant was it to them that you did hydrodynamics?
That's a very good question. The thing is, so this is now a Dutch version, but it shows better the way that the keywords are there. So the hydrodynamics, I think maybe the company thought it was more similar with the hydraulics they're doing than it really is. But that's on them. No, I don't know. But I think, for my specific position that I got, it's mainly like the general idea of building a surrogate model of a really physical physically difficult model and being able to process that model and analyze the results. I think that was more the bigger link. But maybe indeed the company thought, oh, there's some hydrodynamics there. This is similar to river systems. So yeah, but I also there's another company in Belgium that I applied to, which was about air modeling and stuff. It's also a bit related to hydrodynamics, but maybe that helped me also to get a position.
Sure.
If you tell the industry people that you do Fortran90, would they see you as a dinosaur?
So I hear, so maybe for the people online, I got the question if you're telling industry people that you're using Fortran 90, I even used 77 at some point, do they see you as a dinosaur? And I already heard someone saying yes, but yeah, I think Fortran is not very used in industry, especially if you end up in some more engineering kind of world. MATLAB is still a big thing, which is somehow transferable to Python, of course. But Fortran, I think they don't really use, so they look a bit strangely at you. But of course, you show them that you can learn some coding language. In the end, all coding languages is getting to know the language. But in the end, if they know that you can code, shouldn't make too big of a difference.
But you can use that as an opportunity to justify why you use Fortran and not another language, right? Show that you have some knowledge, and because you're not just a scientist, you've done actual development. There's a lot of developers nowadays who never step foot in Fortran, ever. It's considered, dinosaur language for sure. But if you can justify it and say how you used it and how you learned it, that's definitely for you.
Yeah, I think the general takeaway from this is that everything we do within astronomy, we need to try to translate it in a positive way so it can be beneficial to whatever you will do in the industry. I think that's a bit the thing.
One thing that goes into this, and that Phantom helps with a lot actually, because everything is hosted on GitHub. So we have to know Git, and that's massive standard, and it should be named in your CV. Because this is something that people learn when they go into the industry, or as a student at some point, but they don't necessarily expect scientists to know how to use it. And a lot of scientists do not know how to use it. So really it's like a flagship of the CV. You can hold a workflow in your development life that is at least has some common ground with the industry. And I think that's really important.
Do you use Git in your industry?
We do use Git, but our company is also, it's organized maybe better in some academic parts, but still it can be better. But we use GitLab, not GitHub, but that's a bit same. We also have some really operational systems with backends and front ends, and I'm also not really up to speed with that, but it's also using GitHub GitLab and new pushes and stuff and branches. So we do use that. So it's something I learned luckily throughout PhD a little bit while doing it, and that's useful. That's useful skill.
In bigger companies, there's a massive part of the management that is done through Git. So there are tools like Jira, for example, who do a lot of task management that are linked to Git issues and that sort of thing. Just like the GitHub project page sort of works, but more advanced. And so that's kind of the central part of the development, right? And if you can show that already, you don't have to adapt through that. I think it's good.
And one way to demonstrate this on a resume is by contributing to open source software.
Exactly.
Making pull requests.
Look at my Git page. I have all these contributions that I've done in the past. It's also a great showcase of what you do.
Yeah, and it's, Daniel has made this point about smaller pull requests are easier to merge in for Phantom. What if instead of one giant pull request, you have 10 pull requests, smaller pull requests that you've merged in on your resume? I've merged in 10 pull requests in this public open source software. Everyone knows what open source software is. They don't necessarily know what Phantom is, but they know open source software and open source development. They know pull requests, they know GitHub, and if you can show that you're contributing, that's a way to demonstrate on a resume. And to take that specific Phantom experience, translate it.
In your GitHub front page, you have a little graph of how many pull requests you do. So the more you do that, the more little green dots you have on that graph. You can see common practices of some people who will push only when something is done and who won't push it. So
you see when I left academia. Yeah. But this is only on public repositories, I
Yeah,
think.
sure, but if you're mentioning the
Yeah.
talking about open source stuff, and it will be there.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
You don't have to do open source stuff.
No.
If it's there, it might as well use it.
One of the biggest pieces of advice that I've given about industry CV resumes, the CVs, is showing your passion. And that GitHub is part of that. Like, I'm passionate about the things that I do because I contribute a lot to open source software or whatever. And on your resume down below, in this extracurricular, if I can translate Dutch, the junior staff one.
Yeah, there was this.
What was that again?
Yeah, so should I explain what I did by that, or?
Yeah, I can't read it anymore.
Yeah, so yeah, this is because it's nicer A4. So the junior staff thing is that within our institute there are some people like, yeah, not the representatives actually of the junior staff, and that yeah, I try to show with that I'm interested in or that I care about people's well-being in a certain institute. I don't know if that explains a bit the passionate, but yeah.
Yeah, it's just like a way of showing that you're engaged with
Exactly.
your previous, like while you're a PhD student, you're engaged doing this.
Exactly.
And just having that, you weren't just showing up and doing the bare minimum.
Exactly, that, yeah.
You're passionate about it and showing that passion in these different ways, that does speak through.
Also, sometimes in CVs, in this case, I put like a little thing, who am I? Like just in a few sentences, try to summarize just shortly that I did, yeah, that I was invested in physics, but I'm now ready for a new adventure, is what I say here. And then I say that with all the skills I gathered throughout my my PhD and also, yeah, so the hard and the soft skills, I now want to devote myself to, in this case, it's environment and like sustainability. That's what I say here in the little introduction part. That's not, maybe not very necessary in every CV, but yeah, that's what people sometimes do, really in a few sentences say, yeah, show that you're passionate a little bit, those things.
That's especially true for like more development jobs rather than engineering jobs. But if like you don't need to be afraid about talking about physics, like sure it's not really translating into the new job, but people always really like when you know very different things from what they expect from you. So I know that in my previous jobs they were always so keen on having somebody who has done physics before because it's a very different point of view from what the company is doing. I think Silke had similar interactions with people where they were like really keen on talking about physics and stuff. So it's like the paragraph you have specifically that describes things on different levels is super important because it gets people a bit hooked because they're like, oh, I've never heard about that sort of thing before. It sounds so interesting. It sounds so smart as well. So it's important. I think that's really super important.
The comment and a question. The comment is you're not doing a great job of retaining good computational women in computational astrophysics. As in, it's a shame not to keep. But the question is, I guess, more about like from the university side. I mean, we often think about like whether we should have these kind of like more job-specific training as part of the PhD. So things like, you know, should you take courses which are not just like, we have a lot of actually compulsory hours at Monash, which is part of this like softer skills training. Like a lot of it can feel kind of useless for the students at the time, like learning Excel or something. Given that you've made the jump industry, on reflection, do you wish there were things in your PhD, or do you think PhD by itself, or even more strongly, should we as supervisors try to put particular elements in a PhD, like machine learning or something, just for the sake of an industry job?
It's a very good question. Maybe for the people online, Daniel is asking if, from like a more university point of view, should we include more industry skills or something, let's call it, into the PhD to better prepare for if you would transfer. I think, yeah, it's a very interesting question. It's a bit double. I think somehow it would be very good as a first step to be more open about the option to leave academia. I'm not saying it's the case here, but on previous conferences, I noted that immediately peers start to ask like, oh, you're doing a PhD, where you want to do a postdoc, this and that. And then I always felt like I should continue in a postdoc. And the question was never, are you interested in continuing? But always like, where will you continue? And I found it a bit difficult in the beginning to be open about the fact that I was thinking of just doing a PhD, and that was a nice experience, but then leaving. So maybe in that sense, more in general in universities, there might, it would be good if there's more an open mindset about. There's also stuff outside of academia, and also you were saying here, most people at some point leave the academic route because higher up there's there's much fewer positions. About like skills and training sessions, it might be good if there are some more industry related courses or something that you can take, and that you should advise the students, like if you're interested or if you're thinking about maybe not continuing, it's good to take up these like an Excel session. It doesn't sound interesting, but I'm struggling a bit with Excel, to be honest. It might be good to show that it's out there, to be open about it. I think that's a bit how I felt. It's nice if there is more talk about that there's more than academia.
I think you touched on this point, and Beck did to some degree. In academia, the career progression is very clear.
Yeah.
I do a PhD, I do a postdoc, X number of postdocs, tenure track position, and then slowly decline. But in industry, right, you leave your PhD or a postdoc, and then where do you go, right? You had your bullet point there about find the sector that you want to go into, because it's so broad.
That's true.
And you went into data science.
Yeah.
If people here weren't in academia, where would your mind go as to what industry you would go in? Is it data science? Is there anything other than data science anyone is thinking about?
Is there something other than data science?
Video game development.
Video game development?
For like graphics and graphic design and that sort of thing.
Right. I think.
We divide it already.
Yeah, that's true.
Isn't that another industry that is like other people?
The engine part, not really, because it requires a lot of skill. The video game like development side, yes. But the engine thing is super specific and
I think on the data science aspect, the number of presentations we've had at the workshop here that have included machine learning are very, very few. And maybe you can speak about this too, of your experience in data science, how you've had that machine learning experience to break into that field. If you didn't have that, do you think it'd be, how much more challenge would it be, or how do you think you could sort of overcome that?
So about machine learning, as I was saying, another colleague of mine, she also left academia and she didn't do any data science / machine learning in her PhD, and she had more trouble with getting a job or finding a proper a job that she liked, basically. But if you don't have the data science or machine learning experience within your PhD or postdoc or whatever, I think on that topic there's many online courses that are pretty good, or also YouTube tutorials kind of thing. So if you're good at educating yourself, I think you can really get up to speed quite quickly if you invest time in it. And I'm also not saying that's the only key to a job, but these days we cannot ignore it. But machine learning or whatever AI stuff is a big thing, and they're always looking with people that know about it. So that's a key these days. But it's not necessary, and I think you can educate yourself within that topic if you're invested.
I think perhaps to Daniel's point, the educating yourself, to build on that, is if you are thinking about going to industry as the next step in your career, start planning for that while you're in your current stage, because you don't want to graduate your PhD and say, I want to find a job in data science, time to start learning machine learning. Maybe you can somehow do that a year earlier, even if it's not directly part of your PhD research, but somehow incorporate learning that. Planning is always essential. Yeah.
Maybe I can contribute to two aspects. First, the choice of what type of job you want to do. I have two former PhD students who are also two former contributors to Phantom, Arnaud Verissel and Stéphane Michoulier, who both left after the PhD for the industry. and their motivation was mostly like they didn't want to spend their life moving from place to place and as a postdoc, and having a more stable career, which is fine. And so they both went to the same company. So it's the energy sector is hiring a lot, and they were doing, and they still are doing numerical simulations of physical processes for the energy sector. For example, Arno works sometimes on fires and how fire spreads in an environment, for example, in a power plant. And Stéphane is working now on more on nuclear reactors.
Yeah.
So there's a market there. And the second thing is that regarding how you prepare to that, in the University of Lyon and probably all over France, they are in what you call doctoral schools. They have activities they have to do during their PhDs, and one of them is they're being tutored or mentored by people from the industry, usually retirees who volunteer to help young people, and that's very helpful for them to know how to write a CV for the industry and to prepare an interview as you would have them for the industry. And that helped them, and they both did that before finishing their PhD, so they were more or less ready for the market, and they got hired in less than 6 months.
Yeah, I think that's maybe an important takeaway for more senior people in academic environments is if your PhD student decides that they want to leave afterwards, make some space or some room for indeed some kind of these trainings. I think that's a very nice gesture to do as a promoter. And also, yeah, in Leuven at KU Leuven we have some trainings we can do, but yeah, you need to know that they exist sometimes, and yeah, but it's interesting, yeah.
Well, yeah.
In the same kind of idea, if, like for anyone that does any like HPC related stuff, or whatever parallelization GPU, doesn't need to be like hardcore GPU programming. Like even like using Python can be to some extent advertised as GPU for industry. If you like parallelism or those kind of things, so NVIDIA is a bit hard to get into because they are kind of snobbing people right now, for hiring, but in general, like Intel, AMD, or ARM, they hire a lot of people, and actually, like being a physicist, I mean, Francesco Lovatio, quite recently left academia and actually got hired at ARM, so now he's developing assembly specification, and he actually like advertised the fact that he was doing physics and that therefore he understands the underlying like functions of a CPU, how it works, and so on. So those kind of things I can also transfer like in industry, in the HPC world, especially.
Yeah.
Andrew, your comment?
I was just curious, what, if any, sort of trainings do you have to do specifically in preparation for finding work?
Yeah, so the trainings I did was so at KU Leuven there's like, I think it's 3 sessions of a block of 4 hours where it's in a small group where you really talk to each other. And the first one, yeah, it's really about getting to know yourself and how you see yourself in a future career. And so it's not specifically on skills, but rather getting to know what you want. And maybe if you follow those sessions, you also notice that you really want to leave academia, or maybe you notice that you want to stay. That might also be the case. So it's a bit, yeah, the first point here, so the first session was just some general questionnaires where you get to know some of the values in some industry jobs, and then you need to reflect on yourself, like, how do I see these things? Is a salary, a big salary, very important to me? Is a life balance more important to me? And then the second one was more indeed specified to the CV writing. I think there was also a third one where they really go into the training for an interview, but I didn't do that in the end because yeah, it's only a few sessions and you need to subscribe in time. But so yeah, it was not on skills or anything, but I found it important to I think I started in my 3rd year of my PhD doing these trainings and to getting to know what I wanted in a job. So that helped me finding, like, in this mess of what's out there. There's so many things out there that we don't know about, and following these things, it was like, yeah, steps towards that I better know what I want to do.
Those workshops you did, they were at the university?
Yeah, they were organized by the university.
That's a good point that I often tell students, is that as soon as you leave the university, you often lose those university access to those kind of workshops.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. you have a question?
Yeah. I know K11 offers like science fairs where there's a lot of companies that come around and advertise. Did you feel that help in like finding out what you wanted to do, or was that?
Yeah, I did go to some job fairs. That was not only organized by the K11 but by just inter-university. So it was just a bunch of many companies standing at their little booth, and I went there with the mindset that like, oh, I'll find a company that I like and let's go there. But it worked more the opposite. Like I found out there was also like these big consultancy companies that were standing there with their like very official, and I was like, no, that's not for me. So it helped somehow not to find the company that I like, but rather to find out which kind of vibe, let's say, that I like from a certain company. So indeed, going to job fairs, science fairs, it helps to set out this route of getting to know basically what you want. I think that also counts for academia, right? Which kind of things, to find out somehow what you would like in the job.
And just to expand on a point earlier about you really need to sell yourself. And it's a big topic for especially early career researchers. Imposter syndrome is a really big thing, and overcoming that in industry is really important. Because on your resume and an interview, you're the only person there to talk about yourself and how good you are and how perfect you are for this job and why they should hire you. So you kind of have to get over that ick feeling of being able to talk about yourself and sort of build yourself up. And that's a really important thing too. Does anybody have a last question? I'll ask one last one if not. Daniel?
Just about something you mentioned about the problems being a little bit less interesting in industry and also maybe less satisfying in the sense that you have a deadline, you just have to finish and you just have to put up with whatever you've done up to that date because you're not allowed to spend more time on it. Maybe you could comment on how frustrating that is versus also maybe the flip side is maybe not caring as much about what you do is good for your life balance.
This was my question too. So this is
maybe for the people online, I don't know if you heard or understood. So the question was a bit about if you have a certain deadline, you need to stop whatever you're doing at a point you're maybe not fully satisfied yet, how you feel about that. And indeed, it has like maybe even more than two sides. So at some point, it might be frustrating that you cannot research it further. But in my case, when I found out about the fact that you can just stop at some point, it doesn't need to be perfect, was also sort of relieving. Like, this was good enough. You don't need to be. I was just trying to fit something with a simple function, but you couldn't do better with that fit. That was just a thing, and I was like, how can I improve it? And then my colleagues were like, no, but this is fine for now. So that also felt good that you can just stop and don't need to go all the way. But maybe also like work-life balance wise, it's I don't know. Indeed, maybe for most astronomers or people in science and really doing a PhD, you take home all these issues you're having during your work hours, of course, because that's your passion. And maybe in a normal industry job, that's less. But it's double or three-sided even. It's a bit it's different. Let's keep it like that. I also in my PhD I was pretty good at leaving the astronomy at my desk, let's say. Now it's a bit the same, but I can imagine that if you take home all the astronomy every time and you finally decide to maybe leave it, and then you find a better work-life balance in industry. But it's not necessarily like that. I think it depends, because if you really care too little about what you're doing in industry, that's also not good for your work-life balance. So yeah.
Let's thank Silke. So I think we're doing a hack session for about an hour, and then I think we had talked about this, but I think we're going to overrule. We're going to go.
Well, we can take a poll.
We can take a poll. That's probably the best thing to do.
The question was, do we want to do the excursion this afternoon still? People leaving tomorrow afternoon?
So we contemplated pushing the excursion to tomorrow afternoon because we're scheduled to finish early anyway, but also many people might be leaving tomorrow and be unable to go. So we can either plan to go this afternoon and leave maybe about an hour's time, or we can do it tomorrow afternoon instead. Show of hands, yeah.